Hi everyone, I wanted to show you me finishing off my jack sculpt that I started ages ago. Once the epoxy sculpt was dry, then what I did was painted it black. I'm just using black acrylic paint, and then to make sure, it sticks to the clay really well anyway, but just to make sure it stays in place, I'll put a couple of layers of varnish on later on. But it does absorb quite well into the epoxy sculpt, so I've got no worries about the paint flaking off or anything. So first of all, I go over the whole thing in a layer of black paint. This just gives me a nice dark base to start off with, because I want to create like a sort of dirty, grungy, dark looking pumpkin. I don't want it to be like a really bright orange pumpkin. If I wanted it to be really bright, then obviously I'd just put orange straight on top of the clay. But by putting the black on, it gives me a dark layer underneath, which just makes it, just takes the edge off the orange and just makes it look more dark and more rustic. I went all over the arms as well. I wasn't too worried about the body because I knew there's going to be a costume on this, so I just went down as far as I needed to cover the body that will be exposed from the costume. And I just went down the other arm. All this has been sanded and everything once the epoxy sculpt dried, just to get it as smooth as possible. But I didn't want like perfectly smooth. I didn't mind there being some texture to it because it's supposed to be like a pumpkin, and the arms are like the vines and stuff, so it's going to have a bit of texture to it and not be perfectly smooth. It took a couple of layers of black just to make sure it was a nice solid even layer. The times when you can see the Jack disappear off the table is when I'm holding it in front of my heater so that the paint dries off a bit quicker. Then the first layer of paint I applied was a very orangey red. There's more red in it than the yellow. I used a little mixture of cadmium yellow, cadmium red and burnt umber, and as you can see, you can hardly see it on the black that I've used as the base, but that's okay because I will build this up in layers. Like I said, I want quite a dark, grungy looking pumpkin. So this first dark layer I put over the top, and I did mix a slightly lighter batch to go over it as well. I did discover that I'd got a small patch of black paint on the mouth that wasn't dry, which is why it doesn't show up that much on the front, but that's okay because as time goes on I add lighter and lighter layers, and that makes the details stand out more on the pumpkin. I'm just mixing up an orange, and as you can see, that starts to show up a lot more on the black, and I'm just using very thin layers. I'm wiping off the brush as I go along so that the layers aren't too thick and too wet. As time goes on, I start dry brushing. This is just like the first layer, just to sort of get a base colour for my pumpkin. And I start adding the same colours over the arms and body as well, because the top half is going to be that sort of, well, the head's going to obviously be the orange colour of the pumpkin, and then the arms are going to have a mixture of that red, the black and some green mixed in, just taking colours that would be on the vines in real life, but obviously making them darker and more grungy looking. And I use this little stippling effect as well, just to add some of the colours to the pumpkin as well. As you can see, as the layers get lighter, it starts to show up a bit more, and you start to see more of the detail of the sculpt, and it starts to look a bit more orange. But I wanted a sort of browny, orangey, dirty colour, like I wanted it to look like it's an old pumpkin, like an old, maybe old dried, gnarly, shriveled pumpkin, as opposed to like a nice plump brand new pumpkin. which is why I went for the colours that I went with. And as you can see, as I dry brush on the lighter layers, the details show up a lot more, and you start to see where I've put the creases in and the expression on his face and everything. What I liked about this as well is even on the back of the pumpkin you could see some traces of my fingerprints and things, and I kind of like the texture that added. They're like there's like smudged fingerprint patterns on the back of the head, which kind of added a nice texture to it. As I said, I'm going for like a sort of gnarly, old, twisted pumpkin, not a brand new, shiny one. And I used that mixture of orange and yellow on the arms as well. And I'm using like a sort of stippling technique on the arms, because obviously, because the arms are a bit smoother, the dry brushing doesn't work as well. So I sort of stipple on the colour and then pat it with my finger just to blend it in and make it not look so uniform, and just make it look quite patchy, quite mottled. That was the sort of effect I was going for. Then I added a touch more yellow just to make the features on his face stand out a little bit more. And at this stage I've got the brush really dry for the dry brushing. And I decided that was a bit too yellow, so I added a bit more orange. So as you can see all those lines and creases that I sculpted into the head, but at the same time you've got that sort of old pumpkin colour, which is what I was going for. Then I mixed up a green to go on the vines, and the darkest colour obviously doesn't show up that much on the black, but that's fine because it's the same technique on the vines as on the pumpkin head itself, where over time I just add slightly lighter and lighter versions of the green just to make the vines stand out a little bit more. So as you can see, his vine stands out a little bit better, and then like I said, when he disappears off camera, I'm just holding him in front of my heater. It's like a fan heater thing, so it blows hot air like a hairdryer type of thing into my room, and I use that to dry off some of my sculptures if I stand them in front of it. And I'm adding a bit more of that green to the arms because I felt that they needed a touch more to make them look a bit more vine-like. I want them to look like sort of like gnarled, sort of half arms, half vines, because the story behind this is a person who was a human to start with, and then came across some really, I don't know, dark magic or something that turned it from a woman into a pumpkin called Jack. I used this tatty, really worn fabric. It was like a little pouch. Some hair extensions came in that I used on a doll, and it rips up nicely and gives really tattered edges. And I glued that around the body to make a sort of tattered dress almost, and painted the legs in that sort of greeny colour. I made the legs darker, as if these are like the dark vines that were like underground, so like it's the roots of the pumpkin almost. And then I just put a little touch of white paint on the teeth, and that's it. That's Jack completed. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.